welcome to the Food as Medicine segment for our gathering today. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's so broad and so deep that I'm actually only going to be able to touch on a few things for us to consider. And as with everything, take whatever works for you. And there's something interesting happening in the world. We are in need of so much change in terms of our food systems, how we look at what we're consuming, why we're consuming it. So that could be an environmental perspective. Certainly what I want us to start with here is the energetics of our body and the energetics of our food. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we consider that every single thing is energy, then every single thing we consume has energy. It has not only the kilojoules of the calories of the energetic offering, it has its own energetic vibrancy, potential vibrancy and composition or offering for what it does for our physical body. And while we likely all know that everything that we put into our system comes out of our system, it's an interesting time to really consider every single thing that we consume. Every single, whether it's a drink or a food or a medicine, our body must process it and figure out what to do with it. So the most obvious thing that I think many of us who are gathered at this Solstice conference and those who watch this later is to consider, well, I'm going to call it the simplicity. The simple is best. To consider how many ingredients are in our food, and to also really consider whether or not there are any things in the back of the box or the jar of food that we can't identify or understand. Any preservatives, essentially, or any other things that aren't simple, whole foods. So I'm going to start with the idea that less is best. That might mean, it certainly means local. So if we take the example of a tomato, we've all had tomatoes that were trucked from Mexico. They look really beautiful. You slice one open, it tastes kind of like a tomato, a little bit underwhelming. And then we have the local tomatoes that we wait for at the farmers markets that are super duper delicious. And if you've ever had the opportunity and the wonderful experience of growing your own, you get that the flavor profile, and you can even feel when you're eating it how nutritious and energetically satisfying it is for your system. So this is a touch on decentralized food systems, local. How many miles did the things that we are consuming have to travel to get to us so that we can consume them? And the idea would be that, less miles, less carbon footprint, less is best in terms of how close our food sources are to us. Now, this is interesting. It gets me to, food is a very intimate thing. So I'm not saying that we all have to make drastic, uncomfortable changes tomorrow. I'm offering an awareness, a perspective that we can take with us into our future to make self-motivated, highly delicious personal choices about what we consume and how we consume it. And because it's so personal, and also because there is a vast number of people on the planet, especially in the United States, that have become addicted to preservatives. That's something that the food industry knows about and is not widely spoken about. It's known about in the tobacco industry, it's known about it in the soda industry, and it's also just in general, preservatives can have this masking effect that make one feel a different kind of satedness. And if you've ever had the experience of, as I have, removing preservatives from your diet, it can feel challenging to get to remember. And really what it means is it's only when we replace the preservative with something that is actually what our body craves that sort of addiction goes away. But that's a very intimate process of removing preservatives from one's diet if one hasn't done so already. So take this as maybe an opening and an offering for an awareness of what we put into our bodies. So less is best in the sense that local is not only good for the economy and for the environment, it's such a full circle thing. It's good for our bodies. It's what we need more of. And it's also a very personal conversation of whether or not you are in the position to have any interest in growing or making your own food, and whether or not you have any interest in making behavioral changes. So this is, again, as I said, it's an offering, and there's a couple different ways that this can look. There's also a whole industry that has sprung out of these ideas, and it doesn't mean that we have to go to Whole Foods and triple the amount that we spend on food. It can mean that. There, as there's a lot of stamps on packages that are non-GMO, which is wonderful, organic, which is wonderful, gluten-free, which is great, if that's something that works for you. All those things. Well, so let me take another step back. One of the things that I've come to understand is a lot of the need for things like lactose-free and gluten-free is partly because of the vast amount of processing that goes into our foods, and also the things that we feed, for example, our dairy cows. And so a lot of people have had this surge of allergies, inability to process things, partly because of what's been put in them. So it's another, I had a client who couldn't consume any kind of milk until she found her local dairy farmer who raised their own cows, and I had another client who was highly allergic to, she thought she couldn't eat eggs, and then she had to find somebody that was feeding the chickens the right thing. So we can also consider that this might ultimately, long term, if we really get into what it is that we're consuming and why, and have it be a lifestyle choice, that I'm going to do the best I can to consume whole foods, local foods. And really what it is, the most simple thing that we can do is actually look at the food on our plate. Look at the food on our plate as we're about to consume it, and hang out there for a minute and say, do I know where this tortilla came from? If knows the answer, that's okay too. But really start to say, okay, well, even if 10% of what I'm about to consume is something that I'm aware of how it got here, or I know that it's local, or I know that it's fresh, and I know that it's good for me, I'm going to pat myself on the back, because this is such a massive shift that we're having to make, and it's really important for us to be comfortable and self-motivated while we do it. This isn't something that we're punishing ourselves. This needs to feel like an obvious, oh my gosh, I want to do more of this because I feel so vibrant, because the things that I'm consuming, I'm realizing how much more vital energy I have. I'm realizing how much easier it is for me to digest things. I'm realizing how much better I sleep. All of these things are actually linked to everything that we put into our bodies. So really the most basic thing that I'm going to suggest, an invitation, is to just consider throughout the day, start with just one meal and look at the meal and say, do I know where any of this has come from? And if you feel motivated to grow your own food and make your own food, none of this has to be expensive. You can also, there's a vast industry of people who are professionals at creating really healthy foods. So there's so many different ways that this can look according to what your motivation is, what your resources are, whether you have a resource of soil or a resource of money or a resource of time or general interest. It's one of those things where, or you just want to support the local farmers at the farmers market. It feels to me, when we really step deeply into food as medicine, empowering for us, literally energetically empowering, emotionally, psychologically empowering. And I want to invite us to also take a step back and consider our ancestors, consider whether or not we link it to the particular race that this vessel is in this lifetime. We can think about the Native Americans, we can think about the Celtic folks, we can think about everybody in times past, before food became an industry and before there was such a thing as a giant chain grocery market. The grandmothers were in charge of making the meals. They made those meals. They knew every single thing that they put into everything they were offering their community, and the shamans and the medicine men and women were in charge of the medicines. They knew what type of an herbal concoction to make to support somebody in a wide variety of whatever type of healing they needed. Every single thing was a conscious choice, and we have moved so far away from that. And it's interesting because it's affecting us physically, it's affecting our economy, it's affecting our communities, and it's affecting our planet Earth. So the idea of food as medicine is really, we might not be able to change. Well, actually, it's so funny. I was about to record this, and I just got in my inbox that President Biden has put something in front of the USDA requiring them or inviting them to reconsider a lot of the ways that food chains are organized. So there might actually be vast changes coming. So one of the most important things, actually the most important thing that we can do right now is consider ourselves and be willing to take a look at ourselves and this is the same premise of the podcast. Everything is a vibration. And while we can't control everything in the world, we can control this vessel. And what happens when we do that is we become this vibrational example for the world. So when we consider our behavioral choices as consumers who need food, who get to make choices of how we act and how we behave, if we even start to make teeny tiny changes, not only do we affect our environment and our earth in a positive way, we receive those benefits of the potency and the vibrancy of eating healthy and whole foods. So I want to keep it really general, because that could look like hiring somebody to make you the most delicious thing because you don't have time and you just want to do that. That could look like going to the store with a new set of eyes and just looking at the back of the packages and looking at the thing that you're purchasing, and maybe, committing to making 3 different purchases every month that will probably become self-motivating. Or maybe it means, much like this project up here at Seeding Reciprocity, really seeking to become self-sufficient, to grow as much of your own food as possible, or to support the local farmers at the farmers markets who are doing just that. So when we do that, we receive the benefits of super vibrant, delicious food. So I hope that this is helpful, and really, simple is best, less is best. There's so many things for us to consider, and if we could just really look with a different set of eyes at what it is that we are eating as we're eating it, and not judging ourselves for the fact that we might have no idea if we're eating a hamburger at a restaurant where anything came from. That's okay. That meal gets a hall pass, but if we have, say, we're making ourselves breakfast or lunch or dinner a couple times a week, just really starting to become aware of the energetic offering of our food. I hope this is helpful. I hope this is inspiring. I hope that it helps you see that it doesn't have to be, it can be inside of the structures that we've already created in terms of the labeling and the stores that we have that are the whole foods and the non-GMO, but also it can be so far outside that box. It can be that we tune into the vibration of the thing as we're buying it at the store. It can be that we choose to shop local or grow our own. So there's so many different ways, and it is an all-inclusive call. It's an all-inclusive opportunity. It's an all-inclusive call. There's no set way to do it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's literally a personal commitment for our own health, well-being, and longevity, and the well-being of our communities and the well-being of our planet. Thank you so much for listening. Tons of love.